The desert wind carried the scent of sage and dust across the vast expanse of Arizona territory, painting the dawn sky in shades of crimson and gold. It was the spring of 1885, and the untamed wilderness stretched endlessly beneath the awakening sun, a land where freedom and danger walked hand in hand. Amelia Grant stood at her bedroom window, watching the first light creep across her father's sprawling ranch. The Diamond G spread over 10,000 acres of prime grazing land, its wealth built on cattle and her father's iron will. At 22, she possessed the kind of beauty that made men stumble over their words, honey-colored hair that caught the light like spun gold, eyes the color of prairie sky after rain, and a spirit that refused to be bridled by the expectations of proper society. Her fingers trembled as they traced the cold window pane. In 3 days, she would become Mrs. Theodore Blackwood, wife to a railroad magnate 30 years her senior. The marriage contract had been signed last week, sealing an alliance that would make her father one of the most powerful men in the territory. No one had asked for her consent. Freedom, she whispered to her reflection. The word tasted like rebellion on her lips. The house slept in pre-dawn silence. Amelia moved with practiced stealth, having rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. She pulled on her riding skirt, a practical split design that would allow her to ride astride rather than side saddle. Her mother's jewelry, hidden in a leather pouch, would buy her passage to wherever the road might lead. She packed light, a change of clothes, dried beef and biscuits, a canteen, her father's Navy Colt revolver, and the small daguerreotype of her late mother. The floorboards creaked beneath her boots as she descended the grand staircase. Each step felt like a small betrayal, yet also like the first real choice she'd ever made. Her father's study door stood ajar, lamplight spilling into the hallway. She froze, heart hammering against her ribs. "Going somewhere, Amelia." Her younger brother James emerged from the shadows, his face grave beyond his 19 years. They stood facing each other in the dim hallway, two children of privilege caught between duty and desire. "Don't try to stop me," she said quietly. "Father will send men after you. You know he will. Let him try." Her chin lifted with defiance that had been brewing for months. "I won't be sold like cattle to secure his business dealings." James studied her for a long moment, then pressed something into her hand, a roll of bills. "There's a stage station 30 miles north, near Willow Creek. Change horses there." He paused. "I'll tell them you went south." Tears stung her eyes as she embraced him quickly. "Take care of yourself, Jamie. Go," he urged, "before the house wakes." The stable smelled of hay and horse sweat, comforting in its familiarity. Amelia saddled Storm, her gray mare, with hands that had done this work 1,000 times. The horse nickered softly, sensing her mistress's urgency. She led Storm out through the back gate, past the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept, past the corrals where her father's prized cattle dozed on their feet. Only when she reached the ridge overlooking the ranch did she allow herself to look back. The Diamond G lay spread below like a miniature kingdom, smoke beginning to curl from the kitchen chimney. By the time they discovered her absence, she'd be miles away. "Goodbye," she whispered, then turned Storm north and urged her into a steady lope. The landscape changed as the sun climbed higher. Familiar pastures gave way to rougher terrain, red rock formations jutting from the earth like ancient sentinels, patches of prickly pear and ocotillo marking the transition to true desert. The trail was little more than a suggestion through the chaparral, used mainly by Apache raiders and outlaws seeking to avoid the main roads. By midday, the heat had become oppressive. Sweat trickled down Amelia's spine, making her cotton blouse stick uncomfortably to her skin. She found shade beneath a cluster of mesquite trees and allowed Storm to rest, sharing water from her canteen. The silence was absolute save for the distant cry of a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. Doubt crept in like shadow. What did she truly know of the world beyond her father's protection? She'd been raised in comfort, educated by Eastern governesses, groomed to be a perfect ornament in some wealthy man's household. Now she was alone in hostile territory with nothing but her wits and determination. No turning back, she told Storm, who flicked an ear in response. We'll make our own way. As afternoon waned, she reached Coyote River, though river was a generous term for the muddy trickle that wound through the canyon. Still, it was the only water source for miles, and she needed to refill her canteen. She dismounted and led Storm down the steep bank, her boots slipping on loose shale. The crossing point was narrow, flanked by walls of red sandstone that trapped the day's heat like an oven. Storm balked at first, sensing danger in the confined space, but Amelia coaxed her forward with gentle words and steady pressure. They were halfway across when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of horses approaching from the south. Her blood turned to ice. Had her father's men found her already? She urged Storm up the far bank, scrambling for cover among the rocks. 3 riders appeared at the canyon rim, their silhouettes dark against the pale sky. Not her father's men. Their clothes were too rough, their manner too casual. Drifters, perhaps, or worse. Amelia pressed herself against the sandstone, praying they would pass by. Well, one of them called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Fresh tracks. Boys. Looks like someone crossed here not long ago. They descended into the canyon with practiced ease, studying the ground. Amelia held her breath, one hand on Storm's muzzle to keep her quiet. If they looked up, if they saw. Single rider, another man observed. Heading north, light horse, moving fast. Could be worth following, the first man mused. Travelers in a hurry usually got reasons. They lingered at the water's edge, filling their canteens and watering their horses. Amelia's legs cramped from crouching, but she didn't dare move. Finally, after what felt like hours, they mounted up and continued south, their voices fading into the distance. She waited until she was certain they were gone before emerging from her hiding spot. Her hands shook as she checked the Colt at her hip. The weapon felt alien and heavy, though her father had insisted she learn to shoot. Target practice on Sunday afternoons seemed poor preparation for the reality of needing to defend herself. Darkness was falling by the time she reached Miller's Crossing, a ramshackle collection of buildings that barely qualified as a town. The stage station James had mentioned sat at the crossroads, its windows glowing with lamplight. Amelia hesitated at the edge of town, suddenly aware of how she must look, dusty, disheveled, a woman alone. The stable boy who took Storm didn't meet her eyes, though she caught him glancing at her split skirt with curiosity. Inside the station, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. A handful of men sat around a scarred wooden table, playing cards by the light of a kerosene lamp. All conversation ceased when she entered. "Evening, miss," the station master said carefully. He was a thin man with nervous eyes that darted between her and the door. "Looking for passage?" "North," she said, keeping her voice steady. "On tomorrow's stage. That'll be $15, plus $2 for the horse if you're taking her." She counted out the bills, aware of the men watching her every move. One of them, a thick-set man with a graying beard, pushed back his chair and approached. "Traveling alone, little lady? That ain't too wise in these parts. My business is my own," Amelia replied coolly, though her heart raced. He laughed, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Feisty one, ain't you? How about you join us for a drink? Might be your last chance for company for a while." "No, thank you." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Now that ain't very friendly." The click of a hammer being drawn back cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. A man stood in the doorway, his revolver aimed steady at the bearded man's head. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn leather and denim, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of winter storm clouds. Danger radiated from him like heat from a forge. "The lady said no," he stated quietly. His voice carried the kind of authority that came from having backed up such words before. The bearded man released Amelia's wrist, raising his hands slowly. No harm meant. "Stranger, just being sociable. Be sociable somewhere else." The tension stretched taut before the man backed away, muttering under his breath. The card game resumed with forced casualness. The stranger holstered his weapon and moved to the bar without looking at Amelia again. She found her voice. "Thank you." He didn't acknowledge her gratitude, simply ordered whiskey and stood with his back to the wall, watching everything and nothing. Amelia retreated to a corner table, her meal of beans and cornbread sitting heavy in her stomach. She studied him covertly. The way he held himself spoke of hard living and harder choices. A scar ran along his jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. His clothes were clean but mended, his gun belt worn smooth from use. When he finished his drink and headed for the door, she almost called out. But what would she say? He'd already done more than most would for a stranger. She watched him disappear into the night, taking with him any sense of safety his presence had provided. The station master showed her to a small room upstairs, barely larger than a closet. She wedged a chair beneath the door handle and sat on the narrow bed, fully dressed with the Colt in her lap. Sleep seemed impossible. Every creak of the building, every voice from below made her start. Through the thin walls, she heard men talking, their words drifting up like smoke. "Grant's daughter, I'd bet money on it." Reward notice said 22, blonde, riding a gray mare. $1,000 would set a man up nice. Her blood ran cold. They knew who she was. Come morning, they'd try to claim the bounty. She had to leave now, tonight, before... Footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. The doorknob rattled. "Open up, Miss Grant. No point in pretending. We know who you are." She stood, raising the Colt with both hands the way her father had taught her. "Get away from the door." Low laughter. "Now, you don't want to do anything foolish. Your daddy wants you home safe. We're just here to help." The door shuddered under a heavy blow. The chair held, but it wouldn't last long. Amelia looked desperately around the tiny room. One window, overlooking a 20-foot drop to the alley below. Storm was in the stable, too far to reach. Another blow. The chair cracked. She made her choice. Throwing open the window, she climbed onto the sill. The ground looked impossibly far in the darkness. Behind her, the door splintered. "There she is!" "Don't let her—" Amelia jumped. She hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her ankle. No time to assess the damage. She ran, limping, into the maze of alleys behind the buildings. Shouts erupted behind her. Boots pounding on packed earth. A hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. She struck out blindly with the Colt, catching her attacker across the temple. He went down with a grunt. Another man appeared from the shadows. She fired, the recoil nearly knocking her off her feet. The shot went wide, but he dove for cover. "This way!" The stranger from the station materialized beside her, his own weapon drawn. Without thinking, she followed him through a gap between buildings, across a corral, into the deeper darkness beyond the town's edge. He led her to where 2 horses waited, already saddled. "Can you ride?" he asked tersely. "Yes." "Then ride." They thundered into the night, the lights of Miller's Crossing fading behind them. Amelia bent low over the unfamiliar horse's neck, her injured ankle throbbing with each stride. Beside her, the stranger rode with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle, occasionally checking over his shoulder. They rode for what felt like hours, following trails she could barely see in the moonlight. Finally, he slowed to a walk, guiding them into a sheltered grove of cottonwoods beside a dry creek bed. "We'll rest here till dawn," he said, dismounting with fluid economy. "They won't track us in the dark." Amelia slid from the saddle, her legs nearly buckling. The stranger caught her elbow, steadying her. "You're hurt." "My ankle. It's not broken, just twisted." He helped her to a fallen log, then went about making a cold camp with practiced efficiency. No fire, too visible. He handed her a canteen and piece of jerky, then settled against a tree trunk, rifle across his knees. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Seemed like the thing to do. "You know who I am. There's a reward." "I know." "Then why?" He turned his head. And in the moonlight, she caught a glimpse of something in his expression. Not kindness exactly, but a kind of weary honor. Your father's money can't buy everything, Miss Grant. Some of us still believe a person's got the right to choose their own path. I don't even know your name. Cade Morgan. He looked back out at the darkness. Get some rest. We've got hard riding ahead. She should have been terrified, alone in the wilderness with a stranger. Instead, wrapped in a borrowed blanket that smelled of leather and horse. She felt safer than she had in days. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something in the quiet way he kept watch, as if guarding her was simply what needed doing, as sleep finally claimed her. Amelia's last thought was of the price of freedom. She'd left behind everything she'd known, risked everything she had, and somewhere in the vast darkness of the Arizona night, her father's men were hunting her like an animal. But she was still free. For now, that was enough. The desert wind whispered through the cottonwood leaves, carrying the scent of creosote and distant rain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, under the wide western sky, Amelia Grant slept the sleep of someone who had finally taken the first step toward claiming her own life. Beside her, Cade Morgan kept his silent vigil, a man with his own shadows and his own reasons for riding the lonely trails. Their paths had crossed in violence and necessity. Where they would lead remained to be written in the dust and determination of the days to come. Dawn broke cold and clear over the desert, painting the rocks in shades of amber and rose. Amelia woke to find Cade already saddling the horses, his movements efficient and quiet. Her ankle throbbed, but the swelling had gone down during the night. "We need to move," he said without preamble. "They'll be tracking us by now." She struggled to her feet, testing her weight on the injured ankle. It held, though each step sent sharp pains shooting up her leg. Cade watched her attempt to walk normally, then shook his head. "No point in pretending. It'll slow us down more if you make it worse." He pulled a strip of cloth from his saddlebag. "Sit, let me wrap it." His hands were surprisingly gentle as he bound her ankle, though he worked with the same focused efficiency he brought to everything else. This close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the weathering of a man who'd spent years under the harsh sun. "Where are we going?" she asked. "North, like you wanted. There's a town called Redemption about 3 days' ride. Far enough from your father's influence, rough enough that folks mind their own business." They rode through landscapes that shifted like pages in a picture book, from red rock canyons to expanses of silver-green sagebrush, from stands of juniper and pinon to barren stretches where nothing grew but determination. Cade set a steady pace, not punishing but relentless, always watching their back trail. By the third day, Amelia's body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. Her hands were blistered despite her riding gloves. Her back screamed from hours in the saddle, and her fair skin had burned and peeled despite the hat Cade had procured from somewhere. "You're holding up better than I expected," he observed during one of their brief rests. "Did you expect me to faint at the first hardship?" she asked, trying to keep the irritation from her voice. "Most would have by now." There was no judgment in his tone, just fact. "Rich girl like you, used to soft beds and servants. This ain't easy living." "Perhaps I'm not as soft as you think." He studied her for a moment, taking in her sunburned face, her determined jaw, the way she hadn't complained once despite obvious discomfort. Perhaps not. They reached Redemption as the sun was setting on the third day. The town lived up to its name, or perhaps mocked it. Built in a valley between two mesas, it consisted of one main street lined with false-fronted buildings that had seen better days. The Silver Dollar Saloon dominated one corner, its bat-wing doors never still. Across from it sat the Redemption Hotel, 3 stories of weathered wood that leaned slightly to the east. "Keep your head down and let me do the talking," Cade instructed as they rode in. "Town like this, everybody's running from something. They don't ask questions if you don't give them reasons to." The hotel clerk was a thin man with the yellowish pallor of someone who rarely saw sunlight. He took Cade's money without meeting their eyes, sliding 2 keys across the scarred counter. "Rooms 12 and 13. End of the hall," Second floor. Bathhouse out back if you're wanting. Amelia had never wanted anything more than a bath. 3 days of trail dust had left her feeling like she'd been rolled in flour and baked, but Cade shook his head slightly. Later, he murmured. Let's get settled first. The rooms were small but clean, with narrow beds and washstands. A connecting door between them stood closed. Cade checked both rooms thoroughly before allowing her to enter. Get some rest, he said. I'm going to scout around, get a feel for the town. Lock your door and don't open it for anyone but me. Where's my gun? She asked. She'd given it to him after that night at Miller's Crossing, not trusting herself after the wild shot she'd fired. He hesitated, then pulled the Colt from his saddlebag and handed it to her. You remember what I taught you on the trail? She nodded. During their journey, he'd given her lessons in the practical use of firearms, how to aim properly, how to clean and maintain the weapon, how to reload quickly. His teaching style was patient but demanding, accepting no halfway measures. Good, I'll knock 3 times. Pause, then twice more. Anyone else tries to come in, I'll be ready. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, or concern. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the fading light and the sounds of a rough town coming alive for the night. Amelia washed as best she could with the basin and pitcher, changing into her one clean dress. It was a simple calico, practical and unmemorable, nothing like the silk gowns filling her wardrobe back home. She caught her reflection in the spotted mirror and barely recognized herself. Sun had darkened her skin and lightened her hair. Her face had thinned, making her cheekbones more prominent. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. They held a wariness now, an awareness that the world was larger and more dangerous than she'd imagined. A commotion in the street drew her to the window. A group of cowboys had spilled out of the saloon, their voices loud with drink. One of them grabbed a passing woman, pulling her close despite her protests. Amelia's hand went to her gun, but before she could decide what to do, Cade appeared. He moved through the crowd like water through rocks, smooth and inevitable. A quiet word here, a hand on a shoulder there, and suddenly the cowboy released the woman. Cade escorted her safely away while the cowboys returned to their drinking, somehow deflated. He looked up at her window as if he'd known she was watching, even from a distance. She could see him shake his head slightly. The message was clear. Stay put. But Amelia had never been good at following orders. An hour later, hunger drove her from the room. She'd seen a small cafe next to the hotel, heard the proprietress calling out that she served the best stew west of the Mississippi. Surely it would be safe enough to slip out for a quick meal. The cafe was nearly empty. Just an old prospector hunched over his bowl and a traveling merchant reading a week-old newspaper. Amelia took a table in the corner, ordering stew and cornbread from the motherly woman who ran the place. New in town, honey? The woman asked, setting down a steaming bowl. Don't recall seeing you before. Just passing through, Amelia replied carefully. Ain't we all? The woman laughed, though some of us been passing through for nigh on 20 years now. You traveling alone? No, my husband is seeing to some business. The lie came easily, surprising her. The woman nodded approvingly. Smart girl. Town like this ain't no place for a woman alone. You need anything, you come see Martha. You hear? I've been keeping girls safe in Redemption longer than most folks been alive. The stew was surprisingly good, thick with beef and vegetables. Amelia was halfway through her bowl when the cafe door banged open. 3 men entered, trail dust still clinging to their clothes. Her blood froze as she recognized one of them, the bearded man from Miller's Crossing. She kept her head down, praying he wouldn't notice her. But luck had abandoned her tonight. Well, look what we have here, boys. The chair across from her scraped against the floor as he sat down, uninvited. His companions flanked her table, cutting off any escape route. Miss Grant, your daddy's mighty worried about you. I think you have me confused with someone else, she said quietly. He laughed, a harsh sound like gravel in a pan. Nice try, sweetheart. But I got a good memory for faces, especially ones worth $1,000. Please, I don't want any trouble. Neither do we. You come along quiet-like, and nobody gets hurt. Your daddy just wants you home safe. Safe? Anger flared through her fear. Married off to a man old enough to be my grandfather. That's your definition of safe. Ain't my place to judge. I'm just here for the bounty. His hand snaked out, grabbing her wrist. This time, she was ready. The coffee cup in her other hand sailed into his face, hot liquid scalding. He roared, releasing her to claw at his eyes. Amelia bolted for the door, but one of his companions caught her, arms like iron bands around her waist. She fought wildly, remembering Cade's lessons about vulnerable points. Her boot heel found his instep, her elbow, his solar plexus. He grunted but didn't let go. The cafe erupted. Martha appeared with a shotgun, ordering everyone to take it outside. The old prospector dove under his table. The traveling merchant pressed himself against the wall, eyes wide. Then Cade was there. He came through the door like an avenging angel, taking in the scene in one glance. His gun cleared leather faster than thought. The man holding Amelia froze as the barrel pressed against his temple. Let her go. Cade's voice was death-given sound. The man's arms loosened. Amelia stumbled away, Martha immediately pulling her behind the counter. This ain't your business, stranger. The bearded man snarled, still wiping coffee from his eyes. I'm making it my business. You know who she is? What she's worth? I know she said no. That's all I need to know. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. 3 against 1, but something in Cade's stance, in the absolute stillness of his gun hand, made the odds seem reversed. This ain't over, the bearded man finally said. Girl's got a price on her head. Every bounty hunter in the territory will be looking for her. Then they'll have to go through me. You willing to die for some rich girl's tantrum? Cade smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Are you? They backed out slowly, hands hovering near their guns, but not quite touching. The bearded man paused at the door. This ain't over, he repeated. You can't watch her every minute. When they were gone, Amelia's legs gave out. She sank onto a stool, shaking. Cade holstered his weapon and approached slowly, as if she were a spooked horse. You all right? I'm sorry. I was hungry, and you thought wrong. His voice was sharp now. This isn't a game. Amelia, these men would sell their own mothers for drinking money. $1,000? They'd kill for half that. Tears stung her eyes. I know, I'm sorry. His expression softened slightly. Come on, let's get you back to the hotel. Martha insisted on packing them food, refusing payment. You take care of this girl, she told Cade firmly. She's got spine, but spine ain't always enough out here. Back in her room, Amelia sat on the bed while Cade paced, clearly thinking, We can't stay here, he said finally. Word's out now. Every ambitious gun in town will be looking to collect. Where can we go? He stopped pacing, studying her. That depends. How far are you willing to run? Because your father's reach is long, and his money talks loud. As far as it takes, she said without hesitation. I won't go back. I can't. Even if it means living rough, no more hotels, no more towns for a while. Just the wilderness and whatever shelter we can find. Even then. He nodded slowly. All right, get what sleep you can. We leave before dawn. He turned to go, but she caught his sleeve. Cade, why are you doing this? Really? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if seeing something beyond the dingy hotel room. I had a sister once, headstrong like you. Thought she could change the world just by wanting it hard enough. He paused. She was wrong. Before Amelia could ask what happened, he was gone, the connecting door closing with quiet finality. She lay in the narrow bed, fully dressed with the colt within reach, listening to the sounds of redemption at night, laughter from the saloon, a dog barking, someone playing a mournful tune on a harmonica. Through the thin wall, she could hear Cade moving about his room, probably preparing for tomorrow's escape. Her father would never stop hunting her. She understood that now. His pride wouldn't allow it. She'd defied him publicly, rejected the match he'd arranged. In his world, such rebellion couldn't go unpunished, but she'd tasted freedom now, bitter and dangerous as it was. She'd ridden through landscapes that took her breath away, slept under stars that seemed close enough to touch. She'd discovered she could survive discomfort, face danger, make impossible choices. And then there was Cade, her mysterious protector who asked for nothing, who risked his life for her without expectation of reward. There was a story there, written in the lines of his face and the shadows in his eyes, a story of loss and guilt that drove him to save a stranger. Thunder rumbled in the distance, promising rain. The desert would bloom after the storm. Martha had told her. Flowers would carpet the valley floor. Brilliant but brief. Beauty born from hardship, lasting only as long as it took the sun to reclaim the moisture, like her freedom. Perhaps beautiful, precious, and possibly temporary, but worth fighting for. Worth any cost. As rain began to patter against the window, Amelia closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, but tonight she was still free. And somewhere in the next room, a haunted man kept watch, guarding her dreams for reasons she was only beginning to understand. The storm intensified, lightning illuminating the room in stark flashes. In those brief moments of brilliance, the future seemed both terrifying and full of possibility. She'd left everything behind: wealth, security, family. All she had now was her determination, a gun she was still learning to use, and a protector whose own demons might prove as dangerous as the men hunting her. It would have to be enough. They rode out of redemption in the pre-dawn darkness, rain still falling in sheets that turned the desert floor to mud. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, they were miles from town, following a trail that seemed to exist only in Cade's memory. The storm had transformed the landscape. Dry washes ran with chocolate-colored water, and the air smelled of wet earth and creosote. As Martha had predicted, the desert was already beginning its brief, brilliant bloom. Tiny purple flowers carpeted the ground between the cacti, and the ocotillo had burst into flames of red at their tips. "It's beautiful," Amelia breathed, reining in her horse to take in the view. "Desert only shows its beauty after the hard times," Cade observed. "Remember that." They pushed north through increasingly rough country, leaving the main trails behind. Cade led them through narrow canyons and across mesas accessible only to those who knew the secret ways. By evening, they reached a trading post so small it didn't even have a name, just a cluster of adobe buildings around a well. The proprietor was a leathery woman named Rosa, who spoke a mixture of Spanish and English. She knew Cade, greeting him with familiar warmth that suggested old friendship. "You bring trouble to my door, Cade Morgan?" she asked, eyeing Amelia shrewdly. "When have I ever brought you trouble, Rosa?" She laughed, a rich sound like water over stones. "Every time you show your face. But you also bring news from the outside, so I forgive you." Her expression grew serious. "Men came through yesterday, asking questions about a blonde woman traveling north." "How many?" "6. Hard men with harder eyes. They pay gold for information." Cade pulled out his own money pouch. "And what did you tell them?" "That I see many people, and my memory is not what it was." She winked at Amelia. "Come, you need supplies. No? And the señorita needs proper clothes for the desert." Inside the trading post, Rosa outfitted Amelia with practical clothing, men's pants that actually fit, a cotton shirt, and a leather vest that would provide some protection from the sun and thorns. She also produced a wide-brimmed hat and a bandana. "The desert, she does not care that you are a lady," Rosa explained. "She will burn you just the same." While Cade negotiated for ammunition and food supplies, Rosa pulled Amelia aside. "This man, he is good but complicated," she said quietly. "He carries much pain, you understand? I'm beginning to... He lost everything in the Lincoln County War, wife, child, land. Now he drifts like tumbleweed, helping those who need it, running from memories." Rosa studied her carefully. "You run from something too, yes?" From a life that wasn't mine to live. Rosa nodded approvingly. Then perhaps you understand each other. But be careful. Nina, sometimes two broken things together don't make whole, they just cut each other worse. They left the trading post as darkness fell, camping in a hidden canyon Rosa had told them about. A natural overhang provided shelter, and a spring fed a small pool of clear water. It was the closest thing to paradise Amelia had seen in days. She bathed in the pool while Cade kept watch, the cold water washing away days of dust and fear. When she emerged, dressed in her new clothes, she found him cooking beans and salt pork over a small fire. "Rosa gave me this," she said, producing a bottle of tequila the woman had pressed into her hands. Cade raised an eyebrow. Rosa always was a bad influence. They ate in companionable silence, passing the bottle between them. The tequila burned, but it also loosened the constant knot of tension in Amelia's shoulders. "Tell me about your family," she said eventually. His jaw tightened. "Not much to tell. Rosa said you lost them in Lincoln County. That range war was in all the papers back east. Papers don't tell the half of it." He took a long pull from the bottle. "You ever seen what happens when powerful men decide they want what you have?" "I'm learning." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the ghosts that haunted him. "I had a small ranch, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Good water rights, decent grazing. Problem was, it sat right where Thomas Murphy wanted to expand his empire." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his knuckles were white around the bottle. "I wouldn't sell, so he sent his regulators." Amelia waited, sensing that pushing would close him off completely. "I was in town when they came. Sarah tried to protect our home. She was 8 months pregnant." He paused, struggling with the words. "They burned it all. The house, the barn. Her and little James inside." "Oh, Cade." The words were inadequate, but they were all she had. "I killed 4 of Murphy's men before the law stopped me. Spent 2 years in prison. When I got out, Murphy was dead. The war was over. And nothing I'd fought for mattered anymore." Now she understood the shadows in his eyes, the way he moved through the world like a man who'd already lost everything worth losing. "Is that why you helped me? Because you couldn't save her?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Maybe, or maybe I just recognize another soul that won't be caged." Well, he stood abruptly. "Get some sleep. We've got ground to cover tomorrow." The next days blurred together in a rhythm of riding and resting. They avoided towns, buying supplies from isolated ranches and trading posts. Cade taught her how to read sign, how to find water in the desert, how to move without leaving tracks. She learned to sleep light, to wake at the slightest sound, to trust her instincts. They were 5 days out of redemption when they saw the dust cloud. Riders, moving fast from the south. Too far to count, but too many to be casual travelers. "Could be anyone," Amelia said hopefully. "Could be," Cade agreed, but he was already turning his horse toward the broken country to the west. "But we're not taking chances." They rode hard, pushing the horses to their limits. The landscape grew increasingly hostile maze-like canyons, steep slopes of loose rock, dense stands of cholla cactus that seemed to reach for them with thorny arms. Behind them, the dust cloud followed relentlessly. "They're tracking us," Cade said during a brief rest to water the horses. "Good trackers, too. Most would have lost us by now. My father hired the best, I'm sure. Then we need to be better." As the sun reached its zenith, they entered a canyon so narrow their stirrups scraped the walls. The temperature soared, trapped heat turning the passage into an oven. Amelia's shirt was soaked with sweat, and she could feel storm struggling beneath her. The canyon opened into a box and sheer walls on 3 sides. No way out but the way they'd come. "Trap," Cade said grimly, wheeling his horse around, but it was too late. Riders appeared at the canyon mouth, blocking their escape. 6 men, just as Rosa had said, spreading out in a semicircle. The bearded man from Miller's Crossing was among them, his face triumphant. "End of the line, Miss Grant." He called out, "You led us a merry chase, but it's over now." Cade had positioned himself slightly in front of Amelia, his hand resting on his gun. "You boys sure you want to do this? 6 against 1? I like those odds." "You're assuming she won't fight," Cade said quietly. "You'd be wrong." Amelia drew her Colt, surprised at how steady her hands were. The lessons had taken hold. She sighted down the barrel at the nearest rider, controlling her breathing the way Cade had taught her. The bearded man laughed. "Little girl playing with guns. This ought to be amusing. The thing about cornered animals," Cade said conversationally, "is they've got nothing left to lose. Makes them dangerous. Now, I'm going to give you boys one chance to ride away. Take it. Or what? You'll kill us all? Even if you could, and you can't. There'll be more behind us. And more after that. Grant's offering 5,000 now. Dead or alive." Amelia's blood chilled. Dead or alive. Her father had moved beyond wanting her back. Now he wanted her punished. "Then I guess we'd better make it costly," Cade said. The tension stretched taut, somewhere above. A hawk cried. A bead of sweat rolled down Amelia's spine. She picked her target, a thin man on the left who kept fidgeting with his reins. Nervous men made mistakes. "Last chance," the bearded man said. "Come peaceful and—" Cade drew. The canyon exploded in gunfire. Amelia squeezed her trigger. Saw the thin man jerk and clutch his shoulder. She fired again, aiming for another rider who was raising a rifle. Beside her, Cade's gun spoke rapidly. Controlled shots that found their marks. Bullets whined off canyon walls. Chips of stone stinging like hornets. Storm reared, nearly unseating her. She fought to control the horse with one hand while firing with the other. "The walls!" Cade shouted. "Use the walls!" She understood. The ricochets were as dangerous to their attackers as to them. She aimed at the canyon walls near the riders, sending bullets careening unpredictably. Men dove from saddles, seeking cover that didn't exist. In less than a minute, it was over. 2 men were down, not moving. Another clutched a bleeding leg. The rest had retreated to the canyon mouth, their enthusiasm considerably dampened. "You're just postponing the inevitable," the bearded man shouted, blood streaming from a graze on his cheek. "Maybe," Cade called back, "but you won't be around to see it if you keep pushing." They pulled back, dragging their wounded with them. But they didn't go far. Amelia could see them setting up camp just outside the canyon, clearly planning to wait them out. "We're trapped," she said, the realization settling like lead in her stomach. For now. Cade dismounted, checking his ammunition. "But this canyon's got secrets. Rosa told me about them." He led her deeper into the box end, where shadows gathered thick. There, hidden behind a fall of rocks, was a crack in the wall, barely wide enough for a person, invisible unless you knew to look. "Leave the horses," he said. "We go on foot from here. But Storm, they'll take care of her. She's valuable. It's us they want to hurt." She understood, but it still hurt to leave the mare who'd carried her so far. She stripped her saddlebags, taking only what she could carry. The crack led to a chimney of rock, climbable but treacherous. They ascended in darkness, feeling for handholds, scraping skin and tearing clothes. After what felt like hours but was probably less than one, they emerged on the canyon rim. The bounty hunter's campfire glowed below, the men clearly settling in for a siege. Their horses were picketed nearby, including Storm and Cade's mount. "Now what?" Amelia whispered. "Now we steal their horses and leave them to walk out." It was audacious, borderline insane. It was also their only chance. They crept down the far side of the canyon, moving like shadows. The horses stirred as they approached, but Cade had a way with animals. Soft words and gentle touches that calmed them. They cut the picket line, gathered the reins of all 8 horses. They were mounting up when one of the bounty hunters, answering nature's call, spotted them. "The horses! They're stealing the horses!" Chaos erupted. Men scrambled for guns, firing wildly in the darkness. Cade and Amelia galloped into the night, leading the stolen mounts, bullets singing past their ears. They rode hard for an hour before releasing the extra horses, scattering them in different directions to confuse pursuit. Then they turned east, doubling back on their own trail before heading north again. Dawn found them in a different world. Pine forests and mountain meadows. The desert left behind. They'd climbed steadily through the night, and the air was cool and thin. "There's a place up here," Cade said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "Old line shack from my cowboy days. We can rest, figure out our next move." The shack was barely standing, but it had walls and a roof. They tended the horses first, then collapsed on the dusty floor, too tired to even build a fire. "You did good back there," Cade said. "Most would have frozen. You fought." "I had a good teacher." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Amelia." "Don't." She knew what he was going to say, that this was too dangerous, that she should find somewhere safe to hide, that he couldn't protect her forever. "Just don't. I made my choice. The cost keeps going up. Your father won't stop. And now there's blood spilled. Those bounty hunters won't forget. Neither will I." She met his eyes steadily. "I won't forget that you stood with me, that you taught me to fight, that you—" She stopped, unsure how to finish. He reached out, fingers barely brushing her cheek. "You remind me that there's still things worth fighting for in this world." The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then exhaustion claimed them both, and they slept where they sat, leaning against opposite walls of the ramshackle cabin. Outside, the wind sang through the pines, carrying the scent of freedom and the promise of more struggles to come. They'd survived another day, won another small victory, but the war for Amelia's independence was far from over, and the stakes kept rising with each mile they traveled. In her dreams, she was riding storm across an endless plain. No pursuers, no destination, just the rhythm of hoofbeats and the vast sky above. Beside her rode a dark-haired man with sad eyes and gentle hands. And somehow, in the logic of dreams, this was home. She woke to find Cade watching her, his expression unreadable in the dim light filtering through the cabin's gaps. "Bad dreams? Good ones," she admitted. "Too good to be true. Most good things are." He said softly, "That's what makes them worth chasing." The morning sun slanted through the gaps in the cabin walls, painting dusty bars of light across the floor. Amelia woke to find Cade already outside, scanning the horizon with his field glasses. The events of yesterday seemed like a violent dream, but the bruises on her arms and the ache in her shooting hand were real enough. "See anything?" she asked, joining him on the rickety porch. "Clear for now, but they'll regroup. Men like that don't give up easy, especially when their pride's been stung." She studied his profile in the morning light. The hard planes of his face seemed softer somehow, or perhaps she was learning to read the subtle shifts in his expression. "We need supplies," he continued. "There's a settlement about 10 miles north, mining camp called Silver Creek. Rough place, but they won't ask questions if we pay in cash." They rode out within the hour, following a trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine. The high country was a different world from the desert below. Cooler, greener, but with its own dangers. Cade pointed out bear sign on tree trunks, mountain lion tracks in the soft earth. Silver Creek perched on the side of a mountain like a collection of boxes someone had carelessly stacked. The buildings clung to the steep slope at precarious angles, connected by wooden walkways and stairs. Smoke from the smelter hung over everything, giving the air a metallic taste. "Keep close," Cade warned as they rode down the main street. Mining camps attract the desperate. They'd sell their souls for a good claim, and yours for less. The general store was cramped and dimly lit. Shelves stocked with everything from dynamite to ladies' hairpins. The proprietor, a German named Otto, barely looked up from his ledger as they entered. Amelia wandered the aisles while Cade negotiated for supplies. She was examining a display of pocket knives when she heard familiar voices outside. Her blood froze. Through the grimy window, she saw 2 of the bounty hunters from the canyon, talking to a group of miners. Money changed hands. The miners began spreading out, obviously searching. She found Cade in the back, calmly selecting ammunition, "They're here," she whispered. His hand stilled for just a moment. "How many?" "2 that I saw. They're paying locals to search for us." "Back door?" "Through the storeroom." They moved casually, Cade paying Otto while Amelia drifted toward the rear of the store. But as they reached the storeroom, the front door burst open. "Nobody move." The bearded bounty hunter stood there, gun drawn, his wounded pride making him reckless. "Thought you were clever, didn't you? Leaving us afoot like that." "It seemed amusing at the time," Cade replied mildly, his hand hovering near his gun. "Not so amusing now." The man's eyes flicked to Amelia. "Your daddy's upped the price. Girl, 10,000. Do you have any idea what that kind of money means to men like us?" "It means you'll die trying to collect it," Cade said. The tension in the store was suffocating. Otto had disappeared behind his counter. Outside, Amelia could hear more men gathering, drawn by the commotion. "Maybe," the bounty hunter admitted, "but there's plenty more where we came from. You can't fight them all. Watch me." The Mexican standoff might have continued indefinitely, but fate intervened in the form of a drunk miner who chose that moment to stumble through the door. He collided with the bounty hunter, sending him off balance. Cade moved like lightning. His gun cleared leather and spoke once. The bounty hunter's weapon flew from his hand as he clutched his wrist, cursing. Cade grabbed Amelia's hand, pulling her toward the back door. They burst into the alley to find their horses gone and 3 miners waiting with pickaxes and greedy eyes. $10,000, one of them said. "Split 3 ways. That's more than we'll see in a lifetime of digging." "You'll need to live to spend it," Cade warned. The miners rushed them. Cade met the first with a brutal punch that sent him sprawling. Amelia ducked under a swinging pickaxe, her months of rough living having taught her to move fast. She grabbed a bucket of slag from beside the door and flung it in an attacker's face. More men poured into the alley from both ends. Cade fought with economical violence, every movement calculated to disable, but they were vastly outnumbered. "The rooftops!" he shouted. A wooden stairway led to the walkways that connected the buildings. They raced up, boots thundering on planks, their pursuers close behind. The walkway swayed alarmingly under the weight of so many men. They ran across rooftops, leaping between buildings, the drop to the street yawning below. Bullets splintered wood around them. Amelia's foot went through a rotten board, and for a heart-stopping moment she dangled over empty air before Cade hauled her up. At the end of the street, the walkway ended at the smelter. The building belched smoke and steam, its interior glowing with furnace light. Workers scattered as they burst through, dodging between vats of molten metal. "This way!" Cade led her through a maze of equipment to a loading platform on the far side. A cart full of ore sat on rails leading down the mountain to the next processing station. Without hesitation, he lifted her into the cart and jumped in after her. "Hold on!" He released the brake, and the cart lurched into motion. They plummeted down the mountain, rails shrieking, wind tearing at their clothes. Behind them, shouts of frustration faded into the distance. The cart gained terrifying speed. Amelia pressed herself against the oar, feeling the wheels threatening to leave the rails at every curve. Cade fought the brake lever, trying to slow their descent without causing the wheels to lock and derail them. They burst from a tunnel into blinding sunlight, a trestle bridge yawning ahead. Through the gaps in the wooden structure, Amelia could see a river gorge hundreds of feet below. "When I say jump, jump!" Cade shouted over the wind. The end of the line approached, a wooden barrier designed to stop runaway carts. Beyond it, nothing but air. Cade wrapped an arm around her waist. "Now!" They leaped sideways, hitting the slope beside the tracks and rolling in a tangle of limbs. The cart smashed through the barrier and sailed into space, ore glittering as it fell toward the river far below. They lay gasping in the grass, battered and bruised but alive. Cade's arm was still around her, and she could feel his heart racing against her back. That was insane. She managed, but effective. He helped her sit up, checking for injuries. "Can you ride?" "If we had horses." He pointed down the slope to where a logging camp spread beside the river. "We'll find some." They made their way down carefully, both limping from various impacts. The logging camp was nearly deserted. Most of the men at work in the forest. They found 2 horses in the corral, not their own, but sturdy mountain breeds that would serve. "I'll leave money," Cade said, placing bills on a fence post. "No need to add horse thieving to our crimes." They rode hard through the afternoon, following game trails deeper into the mountains. As evening approached, they found shelter in a cave behind a waterfall. The constant sound of falling water would mask any noise they made, and the mist would discourage casual searchers. Cade built a small fire while Amelia tended their numerous cuts and bruises. She'd become proficient at field medicine over their weeks together, her hands steady as she cleaned a gash on his forehead. "You're getting too good at this," he observed. "I've had practice." She tried to keep her touch clinical, but awareness sparked between them. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could smell the mixture of leather and gunpowder that always clung to him. "Amelia." His voice was rough. "This can't go on. Today was too close. We survived. Barely. And next time?" He caught her hands, stilling them. "I've already lost one woman I cared for. I won't watch it happen again." The word cared hung between them, inadequate for what she saw in his eyes. She pulled her hands free, but only to frame his face. "I'm not Sarah, Cade. I'm not some innocent victim. I chose this path with my eyes open. Did you choose this?" His thumb traced her cheekbone, the touch feather-light. "Did you choose to have men trying to kill you, to live like a hunted animal?" "I chose freedom. Everything else." She leaned into his touch. "Everything else is the price." "The cost of desire," he murmured, echoing his own words from that night in the canyon. "Yes." The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the conflict there. She could see him fighting himself, duty warring with desire, past with present. "I swore I'd never—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "After Sarah, I swore I'd never let anyone get close again. It hurts too much when you lose them. Then don't lose me." It was she who closed the distance, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was question and answer both. For a moment he was still, and she thought he would pull away. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him as if he could keep her safe through sheer will. The kiss deepened, weeks of tension and unspoken feelings pouring out. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is dangerous," he said against her hair. "Everything about my life is dangerous now. At least this is something I choose." He pulled back to look at her, and she saw his walls finally crumble. "You terrify me. Amelia Grant, you make me want things I'd given up on." "Good." She smiled, feeling reckless and alive. "Someone should shake up your orderly existence." He laughed, a rare sound that transformed his face. "Orderly? Woman, I've been shot at, chased, and thrown from a runaway ore cart today. That's your definition of orderly?" They talked through the night, sharing stories of their pasts. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to cowboy from Mexican vaqueros, about meeting Sarah at a barn dance and knowing instantly she was his future. She told him about her gilded cage childhood, about the books that had been her only escape, about the moment she decided that any life was better than one lived for others' expectations. "What will you do when this is over?" he asked as dawn approached. "If we ever get far enough away, if your father gives up." "When?" she corrected firmly. "When this is over, I want to build something, maybe a horse ranch, somewhere peaceful." She hesitated. "What about you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I stopped thinking about the future the day I buried my family. Seemed like tempting fate to make plans. And now?" He looked at her, and she saw hope warring with fear in his eyes. Now maybe I'm starting to remember why plans matter." They broke camp as the sun rose, the waterfall throwing rainbows in the morning mist. Neither spoke of the night before, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The careful distance Kate had maintained was gone, replaced by a protective intimacy that made her heart race. They were saddling the horses when he suddenly tensed, head cocked to listen. A moment later, she heard it too. Hoofbeats, many of them, echoing off the canyon walls. "They found us," she breathed. "Not yet, but close." He swung into the saddle, reaching down to pull her up behind him. "We ride double. Saves a horse for when we need speed." They slipped away through the trees, the sound of pursuit growing closer. Somewhere behind them, dogs bayed. Her father had hired professional manhunters now, men who knew these mountains. As they crested a ridge, Cade reined in sharply. Below them, blocking the only trail down, waited another group of riders. They were trapped between two forces. "Well," Amelia said with forced lightness, "any brilliant ideas?" He studied the terrain with a tracker's eye. "Just one, but you're not going to like it." He pointed to where the ridge ended in a cliff. Far below, she could see a river winding through the canyon, its waters dark and swift with snowmelt. "You're joking. The pool at the bottom is deep enough. I've seen locals dive from here on dares. And how many of them survived?" "Most." He dismounted, pulling her down with him. "It's this or fight 20 men. I don't like those odds." The baying was getting closer. She could hear men calling to each other, coordinating their search. In minutes, they'd be visible. "Together?" she asked. Together. They stood at the cliff's edge, hands clasped tight. The drop seemed infinite, the river a thin ribbon far below. Behind them, the first riders burst from the trees. "There! Stop!" Gunfire erupted. Bullets whined past their heads. "Now!" Cade shouted. They jumped. The fall lasted forever and an instant. Wind roared in her ears. Her stomach lurched up into her throat. She had time to think this was madness, time to wonder if she'd die free at least, time to grip Cade's hand tighter. They hit the water like striking a wall. The cold hit like 1,000 needles, driving all thought from Amelia's mind. The current grabbed them instantly, tumbling them downstream in a chaos of white water and crushing force. She lost Cade's hand, lost all sense of up or down, her lungs screaming for air. Then strong arms caught her, dragging her toward the surface. They broke through together, gasping, the river sweeping them around a bend before their pursuers could get off another shot. "Swim for the left bank!" Cade shouted over the roar of water. They fought the current together, finally dragging themselves onto a narrow strip of sand beneath an overhang. Amelia collapsed, coughing up river water, her entire body shaking from cold and adrenaline. "We need to move," Cade said, though he was breathing just as hard. "They'll be coming down the canyon walls." They stumbled along the riverbank, soaked clothes weighing them down, looking for a way up the cliff face. Finally, they found a game trail, barely wide enough for deer but climbable. By the time they reached the top, the sun was high and their clothes had begun to dry. The landscape here was different, red rock desert scattered with juniper and sage. In the distance, Amelia could see the dark smudge of mountains they'd just escaped. No sign of pursuit yet, but it would come. "There's a place," Cade said, scanning the horizon. "Ghost town about 15 miles west. Abandoned when the silver played out. We can hole up there, figure out our next move." They walked through the heat of the day. No horses now, just their own determination. Amelia's boots squelched with every step, raising blisters. Her fine riding clothes, even the practical ones Rosa had given her, were shredded from their river passage. But she didn't complain. She'd learned that survival stripped away all but the essential, and complaints weren't essential. The ghost town appeared like a mirage in the late afternoon, a collection of weathered buildings slowly being reclaimed by the desert. The main street was empty, save for tumbleweeds and the occasional lizard. Signs still hung from some establishments. Assay office, Rosalie's boarding house, the Silver Dollar Saloon, ghosts of dreams, Cade murmured, leading her to what had been the hotel. The building was more solid than most, constructed of stone rather than wood. Men came here thinking they'd strike it rich. Most found only dirt and disappointment. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of light from broken windows. Furniture sat shrouded in cobwebs, abandoned mid-life when the inhabitants fled. They found a room on the second floor with an intact roof and a view of the approaches to town. "I'll scout for supplies," Cade said. "See if anything useful got left behind. I'll come with you. You need rest. That ankle you've been trying to hide, it's swelling again." She looked down, surprised he'd noticed her careful gait. "It's fine." "No, it's not." His tone brooked no argument. "We might need to run again. You need to be able—" He was right, though she hated admitting weakness. While he searched the town, she elevated her foot and took stock of their situation. No horses, minimal supplies, wet ammunition that might or might not fire, and somewhere out there, an army of men seeking her father's blood money. Cade returned as shadows lengthened, carrying treasures scavenged from the abandoned buildings, canned goods that might still be edible, candles, matches in a watertight tin, even a medical kit from the old doctor's office. "And these," he said, producing women's clothing from a trunk, "might be a bit old-fashioned, but they're dry and intact." The dress was indeed dated, high-necked, long-sleeved, the kind her grandmother might have worn. But it was clean and whole, and after days in torn trail clothes, it felt like luxury. As she changed behind a dusty screen, she heard Cade moving around the room, checking windows, planning defenses, always planning, always prepared. It should have made her feel safe. Instead, it reminded her of how much danger pressed in from all sides. "Cade," she called softly. What happens when we run out of places to run?" He was quiet for a moment. "We make our stand." She emerged from behind the screen to find him standing at the window, silhouetted against the dying light. The sunset painted the ghost town in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful in its desolation. "Is that what this is?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. "Our last stand? Maybe." He turned to her, and she saw the weight he carried in every line of his face. "Your father's not just sending bounty hunters anymore. That coordination today, the dogs, those were professionals. Military men, maybe, or Pinkertons." "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but necessary. "I brought this to your door. You could have ridden away that night in Miller's Crossing." "Could I?" He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You think I had a choice the moment I saw you standing up to those men? You think I could have ridden away and lived with myself? I'm not worth dying for. Cade, that's not your decision to make." He kissed her forehead, gentle as a blessing. "Besides, I was dead already. 3 years of wandering, no purpose, no hope. You woke me up. Amelia, made me remember I'm still alive." They made a simple meal of canned beans and peaches, the ghost town settling into darkness around them. Coyotes called in the distance, their songs echoing off empty buildings. Wind whistled through broken windows, making the old structures groan and sigh. "Tell me about after," Amelia said, needing something to hold on to. "When we get through this, tell me about that horse ranch you mentioned." A smile tugged at his lips. "Persistent, aren't you?" "It's my best quality. One of many." He leaned back, eyes distant as he painted the picture. "Good grassland, somewhere with water rights. Start small, maybe 20 head of breeding stock. Build it up slow, do it right. Breed for stamina and intelligence, not just speed. And the house? Nothing fancy. Stone and timber, built to last. Big kitchen. Because I remember Sarah always complained ours was too small. Windows facing east to catch the sunrise." He glanced at her. "What would you add?" "A library," she said immediately. "Floor-to-ceiling books and a porch with rocking chairs, where we could sit in the evenings and watch the horses graze. The word hung between them, fragile with possibility. She met his eyes steadily. "If you'll have me." "Amelia." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You know what you're saying? The life you'd be choosing. It wouldn't be easy. Ranch work is hard, especially starting out. No servants, no luxury. Just work and weather and hope the horses sell. And you, she said against his chest. Don't forget that part. That's the part that scares me most. I already failed one woman. What if... She pulled back, gripping his face to force him to meet her eyes. You didn't fail Sarah. Evil men killed her. That's not on you, no matter how much guilt you carry. And I'm not her. I'm not some innocent you need to protect. I'm your partner. If you'll let me be. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw the battle in his eyes. Hope against fear. Future against past. Then something shifted. Decision made. Partners. He agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of promises and peach syrup. They made their bed from old curtains and dusty cushions, creating a nest in the corner of the room where they could see both windows and the door. The hotel's walls were thick stone, muffling sound from outside. It should have felt safe. But Amelia woke in the depths of night to Cade's hand over her mouth, his lips at her ear breathing one word. Riders. She heard them then. Horses moving slow through the main street, leather creaking, spurs jingling faintly. Her heart hammered as she reached for her gun, checking the loads by feel. The river water had gotten to some of the cartridges, but not all. Cade moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. He held up 3 fingers, then pointed down. 3 men, checking buildings on the street below. Scouts, probably. With more waiting outside town, they gathered their meager possessions in silence, preparing to run again. But as they reached the door, footsteps echoed in the hotel lobby below. Someone was coming up the stairs, slow and careful. Cade positioned himself beside the door, gun ready. Amelia took cover behind an overturned table, sighting down her barrel at the entrance. The footsteps paused outside their room. The door exploded inward. Cade fired twice, muzzle flash strobing the darkness. A man cried out, falling backward. More men poured through, and the room erupted in gunfire. Splinters flew as bullets chewed into old wood. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. "The window!" Cade shouted. Amelia turned and fired at the boards covering it, shattering the weakened wood. Cool night air rushed in. Cade backed toward her, firing steadily, keeping their attackers pinned in the doorway. "Jump!" It was only a dozen feet to the slanted roof of the building next door, but it looked like a chasm in the darkness. Gunfire intensified behind them. No time to hesitate. She jumped, hitting the roof hard and sliding on loose shingles. Her fingernails scraped desperately for purchase before she caught the edge. Cade landed beside her a heartbeat later, grabbing her arm to steady them both. They slid to the edge and dropped to the alley below. More shouts echoed through the ghost town as men converged on their position. They ran through the maze of abandoned buildings, using shadows and doorways for cover. "The old mine!" Cade pointed to a dark opening in the hillside above town. "If we can reach it." A rifle cracked. Cade stumbled, his hand going to his side, even in the moonlight. Amelia could see the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "Go!" he gasped, pushing her forward. "Not without you." She ducked under his arm, taking his weight. Together they staggered toward the mine entrance as bullets whined around them. The mine was a black mouth in the hillside, exhaling cold air that smelled of earth and ancient darkness. They plunged inside, the temperature dropping instantly. Behind them, men shouted orders to surround the entrance. "Can't see a damn thing," someone complained. "Get torches, they're trapped now." Amelia helped Cade deeper into the mine, feeling along the rough walls. Her fingers found what she'd hoped for, a side passage. They ducked into it just as torchlight began to flicker at the main entrance. "How bad?" she whispered, trying to examine his wound in the darkness. "I've had worse." His voice was strained but steady. "Went through clean. I think just need to stop the bleeding." She tore strips from her dress, the old fabric parting easily, working by touch. She bound the wound as best she could, trying not to think about infection, blood loss, all the ways a man could die from a bullet even if it missed vital organs. "Listen," Cade breathed. The men were entering the mine, their voices echoing strangely in the confined space. Torchlight danced on the walls, throwing wild shadows. Check every passage. They're here somewhere. Boss wants the girl alive. The man don't matter. After what he's cost us, I'll take my time with him. Amelia's hand found Cade's in the darkness, squeezing tight. They pressed deeper into their side passage, rough stone scraping skin. The passage narrowed until they had to turn sideways to continue. Then, unexpectedly, it opened into a larger chamber. Faint light filtered from somewhere above. A ventilation shaft, probably. In the dim illumination, they could see the chamber had 3 other passages leading out. Old crosscut, Cade whispered. Miners following different veins. One of these should lead to another entrance. But which one? Behind them, the voices were getting closer. They'd find the side passage soon. This way. Amelia chose based on instinct and a faint movement of air suggesting an opening to the outside. They plunged into darkness again. Cade leaning heavily on her now. The passage wound upward, sometimes opening into small chambers, sometimes narrowing to crawlways. Behind them, shouts of frustration echoed as their pursuers hit dead ends and cave-ins. Finally, blessed starlight appeared ahead. They emerged from a hidden opening halfway up the hillside. The ghost town spread below them. Men with torches moved like fireflies through the streets, searching, but up here, in the rocks and shadows, they were invisible. Need to rest, Cade admitted. His breathing labored. They found a sheltered spot among the boulders where they could see approaches from all directions. Amelia checked his wound in the starlight. The bleeding had slowed, but not stopped, and his skin felt too hot. We need help, she said. A real doctor. Medicine. Nearest town is Adobe Wells, 20 miles north, but your father's men will be watching all the towns now. Then we go anyway. I won't let you die for me. He caught her hand, his grip still strong despite everything. Already told you, not your choice to make. Damn you, Cade Morgan. Tears stung her eyes. I won't lose you. Not now. Not when we're so close to... To what? Happy ending? He smiled sadly. This isn't a fairy tale. Amelia, men like me don't get happy endings. We just hope to go out doing something that matters. Stop it! She kissed him fiercely, tasting blood and dust and determination. You're going to live. We're going to build that ranch, raise horses and children and grow old together, because I say so, and I'm very persistent. So, you've mentioned... His hand cupped her cheek. All right, stubborn woman, Adobe Wells it is. But we wait for dawn. Can't navigate the desert at night, not in our condition. They huddled together through the remaining hours of darkness, watching their hunters gradually give up the search and ride out. Cade dozed fitfully, his head in her lap, while she kept watch and tried not to think about how much blood he'd lost. As the eastern sky began to lighten, painting the desert in soft pastels, she allowed herself a moment of bitter irony. She'd run from a cage of her father's making, only to find herself trapped by his reaching influence. But the cage had taught her something. Sometimes the only way out was through. Cade, she said softly as the first rays of sun touched the hilltop. I know what we need to do. He stirred, wincing. What's that? Stop running, make our stand. Like you said, but on our terms, not theirs. Despite everything, he smiled. Now you're thinking like a fighter. What did you have in mind? She looked out over the awakening desert, her mind racing with possibilities. Adobe Wells. We go there, but not to hide. To end this once and for all. Your father won't stop just because we ask nicely. No, but he might stop if the cost gets too high. If going after me means losing more than keeping me. She met his eyes. Seeing understanding dawn there. The cost of desire works both ways. It's dangerous, if it goes wrong. Then we go down fighting, together. She helped him to his feet, both of them swaying but standing. Partners, remember? Partners. He agreed. The sun climbed higher, flooding the desert with light and heat. Somewhere out there, Hunters still searched, but for now, in this moment, they were free, bloodied, exhausted, pushed to their limits, but free, and ready to fight for their future, whatever the cost. The journey to Adobe Wells tested every ounce of strength they possessed. Without horses, they moved slowly across the desert, Cade leaning heavily on Amelia as the sun climbed higher. His wound had stopped bleeding, but fever burned in his eyes, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. By midday, they found shelter in a cluster of rocks that provided meager shade. Amelia rationed their last water carefully, most going to Cade despite his protests. "You need it more," he argued weakly. "I need you alive more than I need water," she countered, pressing the canteen to his lips. They were perhaps 5 miles from Adobe Wells when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Riders, moving fast from the south. Amelia's heart sank. They were in open country now. Nowhere to hide. "Leave me," Cade said, reading her thoughts. "You can make it to town before they reach us. We've had this conversation. The answer is still no." She helped him to his feet, and they pressed on, but it was hopeless. The riders would overtake them long before they reached safety. Still, she refused to stop, half carrying Cade now as his strength failed. The thunder of hooves grew louder. She could make out individual riders now, 6 men, riding hard. This was it. Then, their last stand would be here, in this nameless stretch of desert. "Amelia," Cade gasped. "My gun. Can't draw fast enough now. You'll need to—" The lead rider crested a rise and pulled up sharp, the others fanning out behind him. Amelia blinked, certain the heat was playing tricks. The lead rider was James, her brother James, dusty and travel-worn but unmistakably real. "Jamie?" she breathed. He swung down from his horse, catching her as her knees buckled. "Easy, sister. I've got you." "How? Why? Did you really think I'd let Father's hired dogs hunt my only sister?" His eyes took in Cade's condition with quick assessment. "Sam, get the medical supplies. Tom, check the perimeter. I want to know if anyone else is close." James's men, cowboys from their ranch, she realized. Men who'd known her since childhood, sprang into action. Within minutes, they had Cade stretched out in the shade, his wound being properly cleaned and dressed by Sam, who'd learned field medicine in the war. "Father will destroy you for this," Amelia said as James handed her a full canteen. "Let him try." Her brother's boyish face had hardened in the weeks since she'd seen him. "I've been doing some thinking since you left. About family, about loyalty, about what kind of man I want to be. Watching Father turn into what he's become. That's not the legacy I want. The bounty hunters. Called off. I've been following your trail, paying them to ride away. Most were happy enough to take money without bloodshed." His expression darkened, though a few needed more convincing. While Sam worked on Cade, James filled her in. Their father's obsession with retrieving her had indeed grown to dangerous proportions. He'd neglected the ranch, alienated business partners, spent fortunes on hired guns. "The other ranchers are talking," James said, "saying he's lost his mind. Bad for business? Having a madman for a neighbor. There's been pressure for him to step back. Let me take over operations. And I've been encouraging that talk, along with spreading word that you're already married, out of reach, that pursuing you further would only bring more shame to the family name." Amelia stared at her brother, seeing him truly for perhaps the first time. "You've been playing politics." "Someone had to. Father taught me well, perhaps too well." He glanced at Cade, who was conscious now, listening silently. "Is it true about the marriage?" "Not yet," Amelia said, her hand finding Cade's. "But it will be." James nodded slowly. "He seems a good man, certainly loyal. The trail of bodies he left protecting you speaks to that." "I never wanted anyone to die," Amelia said quietly. "Neither did Father, at first, but want and consequence rarely align in this country." James stood, dusting off his pants. "Can he travel? We need to reach Adobe Wells before dark." They made a strange procession into town, Amelia and Cade on one horse, surrounded by protective cowboys. Adobe Wells was larger than most settlements they'd passed through, boasting 2 hotels, multiple saloons, and even a small church with a real bell tower. James had already wired ahead. Rooms were waiting at the better hotel, along with a town doctor and a hot bath that Amelia nearly wept at seeing. While the doctor worked on Cade, she soaked away weeks of trail dust and fear, letting the hot water unknot muscles she'd forgotten could relax, clean. Dressed in new clothes James had somehow procured in her size. She felt almost human again, but the mirror showed a stranger, sun-darkened, lean, with new lines around her eyes and a hardness that hadn't been there before. "You've changed," James said when she joined him in the hotel's small dining room. "So have you. Perhaps we both needed to?" He pushed a plate toward her. Beefsteak, potatoes, fresh bread, real food. "Eat. You look like a scarecrow." Between bites, they talked, not as the children they'd been, but as adults shaped by hard choices. James told her about the ranch, about their father's decline, about his own plans for the future. "I want to modernize," he said. "Bring in new breeding stock, try different grazing methods, make the Diamond G something more than just father's monument to control." He won't step aside easily. No. But he's made enemies with this manhunt. Important men who think he's become unstable. If I can prove I'm the steadier hand, he shrugged. It might take time, but I'm patient. And me, what's your plan for your wayward sister? That depends on you, and him. He nodded toward the stairs leading to Cade's room. What do you want, Amelia? Really want? Not just running from? She thought about it, surprised to find the answer came easily. A life that's mine, a small ranch, maybe up in Colorado or Wyoming, somewhere we can raise horses and children without looking over our shoulders. Children? James smiled. The Amelia I knew swore she'd never be tied down by babies. That Amelia had never met a man worth having them with. She paused. Can you make father stop? Call off the hunt for good? I can try, but you know how he is about his pride. He needs to save face somehow. An idea formed. Risky, but perhaps their only chance. What if he could claim victory? Tell people he found me, that I agreed to marry his choice after all. James frowned. But you didn't. Understanding dawned. You marry Morgan, but father tells everyone it was Blackwood. The railroad man gets his connection to our family on paper. Father gets his business deal and you get my freedom. Blackwood won't care. He wanted the merger, not me. He's probably already found some other young wife to ignore. It might work, James said slowly, but you'd have to disappear completely. No contact with the family, no coming back to Arizona. As far as the world knows, you'd be Mrs. Theodore Blackwood, living in San Francisco or wherever he claims. While actually I'm Mrs. Cade Morgan, raising horses in Wyoming. She smiled at the thought. I can live with that. I'll wire father tonight. Convince him this is his idea, that he's won. James reached across the table to squeeze her hand. You sure this is what you want? This man? This life? Once we do this, there's no changing your mind. I've never been more sure of anything. A knock at the door interrupted them. The doctor entered, wiping his hands on a towel. Your man will be fine, he announced. Lost blood, but no vital damage. Keep the wound clean, let him rest a few days, and he'll be good as new. Relief hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her fear until it released. Can I see him? He's asking for you. Cade was propped up in bed, looking pale but alert. His eyes found hers immediately, searching her face as if reassuring himself she was real. Hey, partner, she said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hey yourself. His hand found hers, thumb tracing circles on her palm. Your brother tells me congratulations are in order. Oh, says I'm getting married. News to me, but I'm not complaining. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Cade Morgan, are you asking me to make an honest man of you? If you'll have me, broken down gunfighter with more past than future. You're my future, she said simply. All the future I want. He pulled her down for a kiss that was tender and promising. When they parted, she saw peace in his eyes for the first time since they'd met. "Your brother's a smart man," Cade said. "His plan could work." "You heard? Thin walls." And he wasn't exactly whispering. He grew serious. "You understand what you're giving up? Your family, your name, any claim to your father's fortune? I'm not giving up anything that matters, and I'm gaining everything I actually want." She traced the line of his jaw, feeling the stubble beneath her fingers. "Question is, can you handle being married to a woman who knows her own mind? I've gotten used to it these past weeks. Figure I can manage a lifetime." There was a discreet cough from the doorway. James stood there, looking amused and slightly embarrassed. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need to move fast. There's a judge in town who owes me a favor. He can perform the ceremony tonight. Keep it quiet. By the time word gets out, you two can be long gone." Amelia looked at Cade, who nodded. "Tonight, then." The ceremony was small, held in the judge's parlor with only James and 2 of his cowboys as witnesses. Amelia wore a simple blue dress James had found somewhere, and Cade managed to stand despite his wound, leaning only slightly on a cane. The words were simple, traditional, but they struck deep. To have and to hold, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. She'd heard them at society weddings, spoken by couples who barely knew each other. Now, speaking them to a man whose blood she'd staunched, whose dreams she shared, whose demons she understood. Now they meant everything. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the judge intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Cade drew her close, and in his kiss was all the promise of their future. The ranch they'd build, the children they'd raise, the life they'd carved out of adversity and determination. "I love you, Mrs. Morgan," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Morgan." James had arranged everything with his usual efficiency. New identities, traveling papers, even a small stake to start their new life. A stage would take them north at dawn, the first step toward Colorado and freedom. "Father will believe he's won," James assured them over a quiet wedding dinner. "I'll handle the details, make sure Blackwood plays along. Within a month, everyone will believe Amelia Grant married her father's choice and moved to California." "And Cade Morgan," Cade asked, "died in a shootout with bounty hunters. Tragic end to a violent life." James raised his glass. "To new beginnings." They toasted with good whiskey, the amber liquid warming Amelia's throat. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars that had witnessed her flight from home, her desperate battles, her unexpected love. "No regrets?" James asked quietly while Cade spoke with the doctor about care for his wound. "None," Amelia said firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be. You'll write. Let me know you're safe. When I can, it might be years. Jamie, you understand?" "I understand." He pulled her into a fierce hug. "Be happy, sister. Be free." That night, in their hotel room, Amelia lay beside her husband. The words still felt strange and wonderful, and listened to him breathe. His wound would heal. The hunt was over. Tomorrow, they'd begin the journey to their new life. "You awake?" Cade murmured in the darkness. "Too excited to sleep." "Having second thoughts?" She turned to face him, careful of his injury. "Never you? Only that I can't quite believe you're real, that any of this is real." His hand found her face in the darkness. "I was ready to die in that ghost town. Would have, gladly, if it meant you got away safe. Instead, I get to live, get to have this you, a future, hope. Feels like cheating fate." "Maybe fate owed us one," she suggested. "After everything it put us through." "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "That thing I said in the mine, about the cost of desire? Yes? I was wrong. The cost isn't survival. It's being willing to pay any price for what matters. You taught me that." She kissed him gently, mindful of his exhaustion and injury. "We taught each other." Outside, Adobe Wells settled into sleep. Somewhere in the night, riders still searched for Amelia Grant. By dawn, those hunters would learn their quarry had vanished, transformed into someone new. The rebellious daughter would become a distant memory, a cautionary tale told in drawing rooms about the importance of knowing one's place. But Amelia Morgan, rancher's wife, horse breeder, free woman, was just beginning her story. And beside her, a man who'd lost everything had found reason to live again. The desert wind sang through the window, carrying scents of sage and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the hard work of building a life from scratch. But tonight, they had each other, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The stagecoach north was crowded with miners, merchants, and families seeking new beginnings. Amelia and Cade sat pressed together, his arm protective around her shoulders as the vehicle jolted over rough roads. To their fellow passengers, they appeared as just another couple heading to the Colorado territories, perhaps homesteaders or shop owners. Certainly nothing as dramatic as fugitive heiress and gunfighter. Cade's wound troubled him over the 3-day journey, though he tried to hide it. Amelia saw the way he shifted, seeking comfort that wouldn't come. The occasional tightness around his eyes when the coach hit particularly rough patches. At stage stops, she insisted on checking the bandages, ignoring his protests about propriety. "We're married," she reminded him at one such stop, rewrapping the wound with fresh cloth. "There's nothing improper about a wife tending her husband." "Still getting used to that," he admitted, watching her work with something like wonder in his eyes. To having a wife, or to being tended? Both. They left the stage at Pueblo, a growing town where the mountains met the plains. Here, Cade used some of James's money to purchase supplies and horses. Good, sturdy animals that could handle mountain terrain, though nothing as fine as the mounts they'd lost. "We'll breed better," he promised, running an appreciative hand over a bay gelding's neck. "Start with these, build up the bloodline over time." It was the first time she'd heard him speak of the future with such certainty, as if he truly believed they'd have years to build their dreams. The change from the fatalistic man she'd first met was striking. They rode west into the mountains, following trails Cade remembered from his cowboy days. The landscape changed dramatically as they climbed, from dusty plains to pine forests. From dry gulches to rushing streams fed by snowmelt, the air grew thin and crisp, carrying the scent of evergreen and wildflowers. "There," Cade said on their 5th day out of Pueblo, reining in at the crest of a ridge. Below them spread a valley that took Amelia's breath away, perhaps 2 miles long and half as wide. It was sheltered by mountains on 3 sides but open to the south, allowing for milder winters. A stream wound through the center, fed by a waterfall at the valley's head. Meadows of wild grass alternated with stands of aspen and pine. And there, near the stream, but on high enough ground to avoid spring floods, stood the remains of a cabin. "Whose land?" Amelia asked, though she was already in love with it. "Nobody's, technically. Too remote for the big ranchers, too high for most homesteaders. I camped here once, years back. Always thought if I ever started over." He trailed off, watching her face. "What do you think?" "I think we're home." They made camp near the old cabin, assessing what could be salvaged. The stone foundation was solid, and some walls still stood. With work, a lot of work, it could be rebuilt into something sturdy and warm. "Before winter," Cade said, already planning. "We'll need shelter before the snows come. This high up, they'll start by October. Then we'd better get started." The next weeks passed in a blur of hard labor. They rode to the nearest town, a mining camp called Silver Falls, 2 days away for tools and supplies. The trip ate deeply into their funds, but they bought carefully. Axes, saws, nails, rope, canvas for temporary shelter, basic foodstuffs, and ammunition for hunting. "You'll want to file a homestead claim," the general store owner advised. "Land office is in Denver, but Harry there can witness your improvement markers." He nodded toward a grizzled man playing cards in the corner. "Used to be a surveyor." They spent a day with Harry, marking the boundaries of their claim, 160 acres centered on the valley, including water rights to the stream. It wasn't much by Arizona standards, but up here, with good water and shelter, it was wealth enough. The work was brutal. Cade's wound had healed enough for light labor, but Amelia insisted on taking the heavier tasks until he was fully mended. She learned to fell trees, watching carefully as he showed her where to notch, how to control the fall. Her hands, once soft despite her riding, developed thick calluses. Her back ached constantly from hauling stones for the foundation. But slowly, their home took shape. The cabin walls rose, log by careful log. Cade showed a surprising skill at construction, fitting corners tight, thinking ahead to where doors and windows would go. "Where'd you learn building?" Amelia asked one evening, watching him carefully notch a beam. "My father was a carpenter, back in Texas, before the war changed everything. He tested the fit, made a small adjustment, wanted me to follow his trade, but I was young and foolish. Thought cowboying was more exciting than making furniture." "Do you regret it?" He looked at her, sawdust in his hair and satisfaction in his eyes. "Not anymore. Led me here, didn't it?" They worked from dawn to dusk, falling into exhausted sleep each night in their canvas shelter. But sometimes, despite the fatigue, they'd lie awake talking, planning their future in quiet voices while coyotes called in the distance. 20 head to start, Cade would say. "Good breeding stock. There's a man in Denver supposedly has some Spanish bloodlines, hardy and smart. We'll need corrals first," Amelia would add. "And a barn before winter. The horses can't survive up here without shelter. Garden plot too, south side of the cabin where it gets morning sun. Vegetables will be hard to come by otherwise." They were building more than a house, she realized. They were building a life, choice by careful choice. The first test came in late August when 3 men rode into their valley. Amelia was alone, Cade having gone hunting. She saw them coming from a distance, had time to get the rifle and position herself on the partially completed cabin's threshold. "Afternoon, ma'am," the lead rider called. Stopping well back, they were rough-looking men, wearing the hard-used clothes of drifters. "Didn't know anyone had claimed this valley." "Well, now you do," she replied, keeping the rifle visible but not directly threatening. "Something I can help you with?" "Looking for a place to camp. Been riding hard. Horses need rest." Every instinct screamed danger, but she kept her voice level. "Stream's low this time of year. Better water down the mountain at Beaver Creek." The man smiled, not pleasantly. "Now that's not very neighborly. Neither is 3 armed men visiting a woman alone." "Alone?" He made a show of looking around. "That's dangerous. Being alone up here, all sorts of things could happen." "Yes," she agreed calmly. "They could." Something in her tone made him reassess. This wasn't a frightened woman to be intimidated. This was someone who'd faced down worse than 3 trail bums and survived. "My husband will be back soon," she added. "With our neighbors from the next valley. They're helping with the cabin raising." A lie, but delivered with such casual conviction that the men exchanged glances. The leader studied her more carefully, taking in the rifle held with easy familiarity. The steady gaze, the cabin rising behind her. "Maybe we will try Beaver Creek," he said finally. "Good day, ma'am." They rode out slowly, and she watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she lower the rifle, hands shaking slightly with released tension. Cade returned an hour later with a deer across his saddle. She told him about the visitors while helping him dress the kill. "You handled it right," he said, but she could see the worry in his eyes. "Maybe we should think about, if you say move somewhere safer, I'll shoot you myself," she interrupted. "This is our home. We stand our ground." He smiled at that, pulling her close despite his bloody hands. "There's my fighter. All right, we stay, but I'm teaching you to shoot better. And we're getting a dog, big one." As September arrived, the cabin neared completion. They'd built 1 large room with a stone fireplace, a loft for sleeping, and lean-to additions for storage. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid and theirs. The day they moved from the tent to the cabin, Amelia stood in the doorway and cried, not from sadness, but from a joy so fierce it demanded release. "Hey now," Cade said softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What's this?" "It's real," she managed. "We did it. We're really here, really free. Did you doubt?" "Sometimes, in the middle of the night when you were healing. When those men came, when I thought about how far we are from any help." She leaned back against him. "But then I'd remember what you said, about the cost of desire, and I'd do it all again, pay any price." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "For this, for you, for us." He kissed her then, there in the doorway of their home, with the setting sun painting their valley gold and their horses grazing peacefully in the meadow. When they parted, she saw her own joy reflected in his eyes. "I love you, Amelia Morgan," he said. "Show me," she challenged, and laughed when he swept her up and carried her across the threshold. That night, in their own bed, in their own home, they celebrated more than just shelter. They celebrated survival, partnership, the triumph of will over circumstance. Outside, the first hints of autumn touched the aspen leaves, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled at the rising moon. But inside, there was warmth and love, and the quiet satisfaction of a dream made real. The next morning brought frost, a reminder that winter was coming fast. They worked with renewed urgency, building corrals, cutting hay from the meadows, stocking firewood. The nearest neighbor, a gruff old trapper named Ezekiel, stopped by with advice about surviving mountain winters. "Snow'll be 6 feet deep come January," he warned. "Maybe more. You'll want supplies to last 3 months without leaving the valley." They made another trip to Silver Falls, spending dangerously deep into their remaining funds for flour, salt, coffee, beans, and ammunition. Cade traded labor for additional supplies, helping repair the livery stable's roof. "Your missus know you're working for Jim Patterson?" the stable owner asked, watching Cade work. "Why wouldn't she?" "Well, seeing as how Jim's got that mail-order bride coming next month, figured women folk might not take kindly to helping the competition." Cade nearly fell off the roof. "Competition? For being the only white woman in 50 miles. Though from what I seen of your wife, she don't seem the jealous type. That's a woman knows her own worth." That night, Cade told Amelia about the impending arrival of another woman in the area. Instead of jealousy, she felt relief. "It'll be good to have female company," she said. "Maybe she'll know things I don't about preserving food, or remedies for winter ailments." "You're not worried about not being the only woman anymore?" She laughed, snuggling closer to him in their bed. "Cade Morgan, are you fishing for compliments? Very well, you're stuck with me. Husband, no mail-order bride or anyone else could change that." "Good," he said, pulling her close, "because I'd ride through hell again to keep you." "No more hell," she said firmly. "We've had our share. From now on, just hard work and simple problems." But even as she said it, she knocked on the wooden bed frame for luck. They'd learned that in the West, peace was always temporary, always fragile. For now, though, they had their valley, their cabin, their dreams taking shape. "Tell me about the horses again," she said, "their old bedtime ritual. The ones we'll raise, Spanish bloodlines crossed with mountain stock." He began, his voice soft in the darkness. "Hardy enough for the terrain, smart enough to train easy, coats like burnished copper, with manes that catch fire in the sunset." She fell asleep to his voice, painting pictures of their future, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow they'd wake and work toward making those dreams real. The cost had been high, family, comfort, nearly their lives. But the payment had bought them this, a chance to build something together, far from the reach of those who would cage them. In the mountains of Colorado, autumn was coming on fast. Soon, snow would lock them in their valley until spring. But they would endure it together, partners in truth, bound by choice and hardship and love. The cost of desire, Amelia thought drowsily. was whatever you were willing to pay, and she would pay it gladly, again and again, for this life they were building in the wilderness. Winter came early that year, the first heavy snow falling in late September. Amelia woke to a world transformed, their valley blanketed in pristine white that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. The mountains stood like sentinels around them, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. "It's beautiful," she breathed, standing at the window Kate had installed just the week before. "Beautiful and deadly," he reminded her, joining her with 2 cups of hot coffee. "This is just the beginning. By December, that snow will be over the roof." They were ready, or as ready as anyone could be for their first mountain winter. The root cellar was stocked with preserved vegetables, smoked venison, and sacks of flour and beans. Firewood stood stacked to the eaves on 3 sides of the cabin. The horses had shelter in the lean-to barn they'd rushed to complete. Those first months of winter passed in a rhythm of necessary tasks and quiet contentment. Mornings began with breaking ice on water buckets and feeding the horses. Days were spent on indoor work, Cade crafting furniture from leftover lumber while Amelia sewed curtains and quilts from fabric they'd bought in Silver Falls. Evenings belonged to themselves, reading by firelight from the few books they owned, planning next year's improvements, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. "I never knew peace could feel like this," Amelia said one night as a blizzard howled outside. "When I was growing up, quiet meant loneliness, silence meant being ignored, and now it means home." The mail-order bride arrived in November, just before the passes closed completely. Jim Patterson brought her by on his way from town, seeking the trail Kate had marked. She was a small, nervous woman named Clara, barely 18 and fresh from Ohio. "I didn't know it would be so big," Clara said, staring at the mountains with wide eyes. "Or so empty." "Not empty," Amelia corrected gently. "Just different. Would you like some tea?" The friendship that grew between the women sustained them both through the long winter months. Clara visited when weather permitted, and Amelia taught her to shoot, to read weather signs, to make do with what the wilderness provided. In return, Clara shared her knowledge of preserving food, natural remedies, and the gossip from Silver Falls. "They say your father's given up the search," Clara mentioned one day in February. Jim heard it from a drummer who came through. "Apparently, he's telling everyone his daughter married well and moved to California." Amelia and Cade exchanged glances. The fiction James had crafted was holding. "Good," Amelia said simply. "That life is dead to me now." Spring arrived slowly, the snow retreating grudgingly to reveal a valley bursting with life. Wild flowers carpeted the meadows, Indian paintbrush, columbine, mountain iris. The stream ran high with snowmelt, and the aspens unfurled leaves of the brightest green. With the trails clear, they made their first trip to Denver for breeding stock. The journey took a week each way, but they returned with 6 mares and a stallion that made Cade whistle appreciatively. "There's your foundation," he said, watching the horses explore their new pasture. "Another year or 2, we'll have foals. 5 years, we'll be known for quality." 5 years, Amelia repeated, savoring the permanence of it. "I like the sound of that." They worked through spring and summer, expanding the cabin, building better corrals, planting a kitchen garden that actually produced despite the altitude. Neighbors began to know them. The Morgans, that couple up in the high valley, good with horses, reliable in a crisis. When old Ezekiel broke his leg in a fall, they took him in for 2 weeks until he could manage alone. When the Pattersons' barn caught fire, Cade organized the bucket brigade that saved half the structure. Slowly, they wove themselves into the fabric of the mountain community. "You've changed," Clara observed one day, watching Amelia work with a spirited young mare. "When I first met you, there was something wild in your eyes, like you were always ready to run." "I was," Amelia admitted. "For months after we arrived, I'd wake expecting to hear horses. Hunters, my father's men finally catching up." She gentled the mare with patient hands. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped looking over my shoulder. And now I'm too busy looking forward to worry about what's behind. The second winter was easier, their preparations more thorough, their confidence established. They spent long evenings planning expansions, a larger barn, proper fencing for expanded pastures, maybe even a second cabin for the hired hand they'd need once the horse operation grew. Big dreams. Cade teased one night, reviewing her sketches. Why not? We've earned the right to dream big. She curled against him on their handmade sofa, fire crackling in the hearth. Besides, someone told me once that good things are worth chasing, even if they seem too good to be true. Wise man, he murmured, kissing her hair. Must be devastatingly handsome, too. Tolerably so, she allowed, laughing when he tickled her in response. By their third spring in the valley, the Morgan Horse Ranch was becoming known throughout the region. Their first foals were strong and intelligent, showing the best qualities of both bloodlines. Buyers began making the difficult journey to their valley, leaving with horses and spreading word of the quality they'd found. We'll need to expand faster than planned, Cade said after turning away their fourth buyer in a week for lack of stock. Maybe bring in a partner, someone with capital. No. Amelia's response was immediate and firm. No partners, no investors. We build what we can build, grow as we can grow. The moment we let others have a say is the moment we start losing what we've made. He studied her, recognizing the steel that had carried her through their escape. All right, we do it our way. Slow and steady. Our way. She agreed. One day in late summer, as Amelia worked in the garden, she heard horses approaching, multiple riders, moving with purpose. For a moment, the old fear clutched at her heart. Then she recognized the lead rider and dropped her hoe in shock. Jamie? Her brother swung down from his horse, older and more weathered than when she'd last seen him. They embraced fiercely while Cade emerged from the barn, hand instinctively near his gun until he too recognized their visitor. 3 years, James said, holding her at arm's length to study her. You look happy, really happy. I am, but what are you doing here? His father, dead, James said gently. 6 months ago, his heart gave out. I think he never recovered from losing you, though he'd never admit it. Amelia felt a complex mix of emotions, grief for the father he'd been before pride consumed him, relief that the threat was truly over, guilt that she felt that relief. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. He left you something, James continued, producing a leather portfolio. Changed his will before he died, said his daughter had shown more backbone than he'd credited, deserved her portion whether she wanted it or not. The inheritance was substantial, not enough to transform their lives, but enough to secure their future, enough to build the bigger barn, improve the breeding stock, weather bad years without fear. I can't decide if this is an apology or a final attempt at control, Amelia said, staring at the documents. Does it matter? Cade asked quietly. It's yours either way. What you do with it is your choice. She looked around their valley, at the cabin they'd built with their own hands, the horses grazing in pastures they'd cleared, the life they'd carved from wilderness and determination. Then she looked at her husband, her partner, the man who'd helped her find her freedom. We'll take it, she decided, and use it to build something Father never could have imagined, a legacy based on partnership, not power. James stayed for 3 days, marveling at what they'd accomplished. On his last evening, he raised a glass of whiskey to them both. To Amelia Grant, he said, who rode for freedom and found so much more. To Amelia Morgan, she corrected gently, who learned that freedom isn't about running from something, but building towards something better. As autumn painted the aspens gold once more, Amelia stood on the porch Cade had added to their cabin, watching him work with the yearlings in the corral. The boy from town who helped with the horses was learning quickly under Cade's patient instruction. Clara was due to visit tomorrow with her new baby. Life had developed a rhythm, a richness she'd never imagined during those desperate days of flight. I rode for freedom, she murmured to herself, remembering words spoken in anger and fear. But you taught me the cost of desire. The cost had been everything: family, comfort, safety, nearly their lives. But the payment had bought them this: a home built by choice, a life shaped by their own hands, love tempered by hardship into something unbreakable. Cade looked up from his work and smiled at her, that rare, transformative expression that still made her heart skip. She smiled back, then went inside to start dinner, humming an old song her mother used to sing. In the mountains of Colorado, the Morgan Horse Ranch stood as testament to what two people could build when they refused to let the world cage them. The horses they raised were strong and free, like their owners, creatures shaped by wild places and gentle hands, carrying in their bloodlines the promise that some things were worth any price. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dreams to chase. But tonight, there was peace and purpose, and the quiet satisfaction of a life truly lived. The cost of desire, everything and nothing. A price Amelia Morgan paid gladly, every single day. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Amelia and Cade's journey from desperate flight to finding their home in the Colorado mountains. Where are you listening to this story? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about their adventure. Did you think they'd make it? What was your favorite part? I'd love to hear from you.